across South Wales. These will be heavy at times, especially in the west, windy with some gales developing. The Midlands will also be cloudy with patchy outbreaks of rain at times, although this will become heavier and more persistent later. It's going to be windy and gusty for all with possible gales. Persistent rain will be falling across the northeast with limited drier spells. The rain will be heavy at times and it's going to be windy with gales over coast and high ground. It's going to be a little bit drier and a little bit brighter in Scotland with some sunny spells possible. There will be blustery showers with a bit of a wintry touch to them over higher ground, and it is going to feel quite chilly. Heavy rain will just be clearing eastern parts of Northern Ireland with sunny spells and scattered blustery, perhaps wintry showers following. It's also going to be windy with coastal gales. Now the rain will steadily clear southeast with showers following, wintry in the north and remaining windy for many.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
That you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome. I'm Alastair Stewart, and for the next 2 hours I'll be keeping you company on TV and radio with the stories that really matter across the country. As Ukraine and the rest of Europe holds its breath, we ask if the West has been played by Russia. I have a wealth of guests to help me unpack it all. But first, here's a full news bulletin with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Alistair. It's exactly midday. Breaking news this lunchtime. Buckingham Palace has confirmed that the Queen has tested positive for COVID. In a statement, the Palace said Her Majesty is experiencing mild, cold-like symptoms, but expects to carry out light duties this week. The head of state, who's 95, tested positive after she had been in direct contact with her eldest son and heir, the Prince of Wales, the week he had the disease. The announcement comes just a few weeks after the nation's longest reigning monarch reached her historic Platinum Jubilee of 70 years on the throne. Buckingham Palace says that she will continue to receive medical attention and follow all the appropriate guidelines. And we'll have more on that breaking story as we have it. The Prime Minister has warned that a Russian invasion of Ukraine would be the biggest conflict in Europe since World War II. This morning, explosions were heard in the rebel-held city of Donetsk in the east of the country, and the military reported the death of 2 soldiers. President Volodymyr Zelensky is calling for talks with Russia's Vladimir Putin in a bid to ease tensions. Former UK ambassador to Russia, Sir Tony Brenton, told GB News he doesn't think there'll be a war.
I knew Putin when I was working as ambassador. He's a very, very cautious man. He knows that a war is a very dangerous and unpredictable action, which could, if it fails, bring down his regime. I think that what's going on is a continuation of what's been going on for the last few months, is rising pressure by Russia on the West to try to get a more substantial response to the various demands they put on the table than they've received so far.
An amber weather warning has been issued for Northern Ireland, with Storm Franklin now hitting the UK today. It comes just 2 days after Storm Eunice caused what providers say was the biggest national power outage on record. Around 155,000 people are still without electricity. Yellow weather warnings are in place for Wales and most of England, with winds of up to 70 miles per hour expected to cause more problems. The legal requirement to self-isolate if you test positive for COVID is set to end this week. Downing Street says the Prime Minister will lift the restriction by Friday as part of his Living with COVID plan. He'll tell MPs that the vaccine programme, testing and new treatments can be relied upon to keep the public safe. Senior NHS managers have criticised the move. Labour MP Steve McCabe told GB News the decision seems sudden.
Everyone would like to get back to normal. I understand that, but it's not that long ago that you were interviewing people about new variants and potential additional risks. And I'm just slightly surprised that all of a sudden someone is able to say, that's it, we've decided it's over.
A passenger who was among 12 missing people has been rescued from a burning ferry. The fire on the Italian-flagged Euroferry Olympic, which was sailing from Greece to Italy, started in the early hours of Friday morning. Rescuers discovered the survivor on the stern of the vessel as it was being towed towards Corfu. 11 people are still unaccounted for. Canadian police will make what they hope will be a final push to clear the capital of demonstrators today. Police, who've arrested 170 people, have been using pepper spray and stun grenades to clear lorry drivers from the city centre after 3 weeks of protests against vaccine mandates. The self-styled Freedom Convoy has inspired similar protests in France, New Zealand and the Netherlands. A helicopter has crashed dangerously close to swimmers on a crowded beach in Miami. No one on the beach was injured, but 2 of the 3 people on board were taken to a hospital. They're said to be in a stable condition. And what an achievement. Great Britain has won its first Olympic curling gold medal in 20 years. The women's team dominated the final against Japan to win 10-3. The royal family tweeted their congratulations, adding it was a fantastic end to the Games. Captain Eve Muirhead says it was a proud moment.
Feel phenomenal, and it's a moment that we're going to remember forever. This team has put in a fantastic shift this week. We're very proud of each other, and yeah, we can't wait to celebrate together.
OK, this is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now it's back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Thank you very much indeed. Coming up this afternoon on Alastair Stewart and Friends, we'll be talking about Ukraine and asking if the West has been played. If the West fails to stop a Russian invasion of Ukraine or averts it by accepting Russia's demand that Ukraine rolls back on its hope of joining NATO, hasn't Putin won? I've got a great list of guests to speak on this afternoon. Plus, this week on Rural Spotlight, we're looking at the people who look after our beloved furry friends, the vets. There are warnings that many of them are facing burnout. They're facing an influx of pets, and they're expected to see on a daily basis due to the boom in people buying pets during the lockdown. They're now finding, however, that they can't cope. I'll also be speaking to a great friend of mine about a fantastic British business. Richard Hollingbury is the founder of Godminster Cheese and will join me before 1 o'clock. And as always, I want to hear from you. You can email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk. We're also on Twitter, Facebook and all the rest of it. And don't forget you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you have been very busy already. So thank you, keep it coming. Many thought it was pretty bold of Ukraine's President Zelensky to even leave his country in the current climate and attend the Munich Security Conference yesterday. But he clearly felt the need to deliver his message face-to-face to world leaders and NATO. I quote, "We will defend our land with or without the support of our partners." He went on to say, Ukraine will not be the buffer between NATO and the Russian army. Well, earlier at the same conference, Boris Johnson had said if Russia invaded Ukraine, it would mean, and I quote, "the destruction of a democratic state, a country that's been free for a generation with a proud history of elections." He then set out in more precise detail than before the sanctions that would befall Russia if they did invade. It would be barred from international capital markets in London, and we would, quote, "open up the matryoshka dolls of certain Russian-owned companies to seek out and sanction their real owners." Now, these warnings were as much aimed at the oligarchs who support and sustain Mr. Putin as the Russian president himself. Might they even, at this late stage, lean on Mr. Putin in defence of their wallets and their vast economic interests? Interesting thought. But in a nutshell, Ukraine, a democratic state, a country that's been free for a generation, as Boris Johnson put it, wants to join NATO, but Russia doesn't want it to. It may yet invade to enforce its will. That, we know, would be answered by anger, condemnation and sanctions. If that's all, Russia would then eye a wider canvas from the Baltics to the old Soviet satellite countries close to its borders. That's not just my fear or fantasy. The Foreign Secretary herself, Liz Truss, says as much in today's Mail on Sunday. And the Sunday Times writes of appeasement, echoing Defence Secretary Ben Wallace's concern about the whiff of Munich, not the security conference that's just finished, but Chamberlain's duping by Hitler in 1938. The journey back to superpower status is clearly Putin's objective. Now, weave in the growing engagement between Russia and China, which Liz Truss also mentions, and a more worrying picture develops. Have we also taken our eye off the ball of the renewed Russia-Chinese friendship? If the West fails to stop a Russian invasion of Ukraine or averts it by accepting Russia's demand that Ukraine rolls back on that hope of joining NATO, then hasn't Putin won? If he has, might that embolden China to move on Taiwan? The stakes globally literally couldn't be much higher. So today I'm asking if the West has been played. I have great guests, including two former defence secretaries, one of whom is also a former foreign secretary, and a returning guest, a Russian, with an insider's view of Kremlin thinking. You'll hear what they all think. Let me know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.uk via Twitter, Facebook, and all the rest of it. Well, I'm delighted to say that the first of that stellar lineup is sitting just next to me here in the studio. It is Sir Malcolm Rifkin, who is, as I say, former Foreign Secretary, former Defence Secretary, but also, interestingly and importantly, in terms of what folk are being told and know, you were the chair of the Intelligence and Security Committee of Parliament. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot that's known that we don't know, and you could argue quite rightly so. But in your view, do you agree that the cyber and the false flag war is already underway?
Oh, that's always been Russian practice, and of course it's nothing new. When Hitler invaded Poland in 1939, they invented an alleged Polish attack on Germany the day they declared war on Poland and invaded Poland. This is what dictators get up to, and I think what's been smart of President Biden is to highlight false flags as a likely issue weeks ago. You know, the Russians can't suddenly produce this claim without it looking absurd, because it's exactly what was predicted they would do if they wanted to invade.
So game on.
I think that on this occasion, I was very critical of the way the Americans and the British government reacted to the Crimea controversy 6 years ago. I thought we were caught napping on that one and did not react properly. I have to say I've been hugely reassured and impressed by both the NATO reaction, by the American president, and indeed by our own government, in the robust way. We've not only made it clear our total rejection of what Russia is considering, but gone into unprecedented detail as to what the reaction and response will be, including something you haven't mentioned yet in this program, which is that if Ukraine was invaded and wholly or partially occupied, the United States, the United Kingdom, other countries would give active military help, not troops, but military equipment to Ukraine, which has already started over the last couple of weeks.
I take that point completely, and let me play devil's advocate to it, in a sense, because Ukraine's President Zelensky was clear yesterday, quotes, "We fight even if on our own. We won't be the buffer between NATO and Russia. So we won't fight in Ukraine, but we might provide yet more weaponry for his army to see off the Russians."
Over the last few weeks, I've been doubtful, and I still remain doubtful, that Putin is actually going to invade Ukraine with all the military forces he's put together. But it's becoming seriously questionable whether that might be his intent. If it turns out that he is going to invade, it'll be the stupidest decision he's ever taken. And he will get mired in a conflict he cannot subsequently control. Because Ukraine is not like Georgia or one of the Baltic states, a tiny little country with huge Russia next door. Ukraine is 41 million people.
And one of the world's biggest food suppliers.
Its landmass alone is about 250,000 square miles. Now, you cannot occupy a country of that size with 150,000 troops. And in any event, Ukrainians 6 years ago had an army of about 12 to 15,000. Today they have an army of over 100,000. Doesn't mean they would defeat the Russians, but it would be a long, bloody war, and the people of Russia would not thank Putin. And he knows that.
Heavy pounding.
He's not a lunatic.
No, quite so.
He's cruel and cunning, and I hope and I suspect we're still going to avoid a full-scale war.
I completely echo that, but given all of your experience, are you fearful, Malcolm, that the price that we may be willing to pay is to concede to the Kremlin that Ukraine's aspirations for membership of NATO are now shelved for the foreseeable future?
This issue dominates a lot of the headlines, and it's what Putin presents as being the issue. He knows as well as I do that this issue, the question of NATO membership for Ukraine, was actually rejected by NATO in 2010 at the conference in Bucharest. They left open a theoretical possibility, but they decided that they could not absorb Ukraine into NATO. The Ukrainians know that, but what's more important, Putin knows that perfectly well. There was no reason to suddenly, a few weeks ago, start assembling vast numbers of troops on the border as if suddenly NATO was going to change its mind. He knows as well as the rest of us that is not remotely on the cards, either now or in the foreseeable future.
Liz Truss, and we were talking about this before we both came into the studio, Liz Truss has given this interview, two-page interview, to the Mail on Sunday, where she warns if Putin, by whatever means, is seen to have scored a victory over Ukraine, and I take the nuances that you've just eloquently described, but if he does that, where next? The Baltics, Romania, Bulgaria, a greater Russia, a post-Cold War reset?
Well, first of all, I don't think there's the slightest possibility of NATO changing its position, that they will not give guarantees, that Russia has no veto. But NATO took a decision in 2010 not to advance NATO membership, and that is not going to change. So I don't think the NATO position is in any way in doubt. What is being speculated upon, after some rumors that came out of Kiev, was whether President Zelensky might actually say to the Russians, look, although we continue to aspire to membership of NATO, there's no prospect of it in the next 10, 20, 30 years, something of that kind. Now, if he said that, it wouldn't change the reality one iota. Nothing would have been achieved except in diplomatic theatre that would enable Putin to say, aha, look what I've achieved. But the real answer is you'd achieve zero, except in terms of the theatre of a statement by the Ukrainian president saying what everybody already knew.
So in a sentence, what's your answer to my question? Have we been played?
I thought there was a risk of that. No, quite the other way around. I think when Putin... Remember, the timing of this crisis is no coincidence. It was in the immediate aftermath of the American humiliation in Afghanistan and the belief that America was preoccupied with China. And Putin has always been an opportunist. He's cruel, he's cunning, but he's calculating. He's not a wild man. 6 years ago, he got it right on Crimea, that the West wasn't ready. What he's managed to achieve single-handed is not what he expected or wanted. First of all, he's united NATO in a way it hasn't been united for 20 years. NATO is more robust and more united. Nord Stream will be removed, the oil pipeline. Even the Germans will be on side on that if he was to invade. That wasn't part of his program. And the second thing he's achieved is, of course, NATO has to have forward deployment within NATO to Poland, to the Baltic states, Not because that's what we wanted to do, but because these countries are terrified of Russia.
Right, Malcolm, we're going to leave it there, but you've kindly agreed to stay on.
Yes, sure.
Listen to what Sir Michael says next, and also what our viewers are already emailing in.
By all means.
Have you until 12:30, and we're grateful for that. Sir Malcolm Rifkin, former chair of the Intelligence and Security Committee of Parliament, Defence and Foreign Secretary. I'm delighted to be joined now, as I said there, by Sir Michael Fallon. And Michael himself is a former Defence Secretary between 2014 and 2017. Really good of you to join us, Michael. Thank you very much indeed. Do you think that we have been played by Putin and Russia?
No, I don't. I agree with Sir Malcolm on that. And good afternoon, Alistair. Putin has invaded 2 countries in the last 12 years. He's poisoned our own citizens down in Salisbury. He's launched attacks against us. And he's got half his army on the edge of Ukraine. So I don't think anybody's been taken in by Putin. And as Malcolm says, I think we've now really woken up. And what he's done is actually woken NATO up to the danger.
Sanctions, as I said in my introduction, struck me when Johnson spelt them out in detail in Munich, really are more impressive than I thought they might be. But he was equally clear, not a British boot on Ukrainian soil. Is that right in your view?
Well, first on sanctions, they need to be severe. They need to be tough. We need to learn from last time. We imposed sanctions after Putin invaded the Crimea, but clearly they did not have the full effect that they should have, because they haven't deterred him from the trouble he's now causing on Ukraine's border. So the package of sanctions really has to be tough, and everybody, Germany, France, ourselves, have got to enforce them and, if necessary, pay the price. So far as troops there are concerned, I sent troops into Ukraine to help train and rebuild the Ukrainian army. They've been doing that. They've trained nearly 30,000 of the Ukrainian army, and we've now supplied the kind of defensive weapons that army needs. But in the end, Ukraine is not a member of NATO and therefore can't rely on NATO members to defend it. But I think we've done now, and we've been doing in the last few weeks, we've done what we can to help strengthen Ukraine. And I dare say we'll be giving them other help too over the next few weeks to resist, for example, cyber attacks, where we have some capability to offer them.
And I put this to Sir Malcolm as well, with the current Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, who says if we don't stand firm enough, if Putin can find a way of claiming even a partial Pyrrhic victory over Ukraine, he will then turn his attentions to the Baltics, to the other former Soviet satellites as well. How much of a real fear is that?
Well, he's been massing troops on the edge of these, on the edge of NATO. He's been causing trouble in the Western Balkans. He's been mounting cyber attacks against a whole range of Western European countries, and indeed against the United States. So he wants to undermine NATO. He wants to undermine the one strong defensive organisation that we've had since the Second World War. And there's a very real risk now. If he's allowed to invade Ukraine, just as he invaded Crimea 8 years ago, just as he invaded Georgia over 10 years ago, then nobody really is safe. If he can invade a democracy, other democracies are in peril.
Sir Malcolm Rifkin was saying that we had learnt a good deal from the Crimean situation and, as it were, I think, I'm not quoting you, Malcolm, but got our act together more clearly. You told my team when you kindly agreed to come on the programme, and I quote, "There's plenty here for the West still to learn from this crisis." What had you in mind?
Well, certainly sanctions. They weren't tough enough last time. They didn't clear out Russian money from the City of London. They didn't clear out Russians from the City of London from hiding here. The sanctions clearly weren't tough enough. They didn't impact on Russia's participation in the international financial system and its trade with Western Europe. They didn't hurt Russia properly. Secondly, I think what we didn't do last time was do enough, I think, to strengthen Ukraine and its defence. Britain did. We sent our trainers in there to help the Ukrainian army. We didn't send them enough defensive equipment. I'm very pleased to see that Ben Wallace, my successor as Defence Secretary, has been doing that now, giving them the anti-tank weapons and the specialist equipment they need to defend themselves better. We could perhaps have been doing that earlier.
In your view, could this affair also embolden Putin in his relationship with President Xi of China?
yes, they're clearly working very closely together. They're trading with each other. Russia is selling a lot of gas now to China. And clearly that is a relationship that is strengthening. And, they are autocrats together. Putin has his eye on Ukraine, and President of China obviously has his eye on Taiwan. And one action in one place might well turn out to be used as cover for action in another. So again, it's very important for us in the West to be very, very clear that this kind of action by autocrats invading sovereign democracies when they've signed treaties saying they weren't going to invade and they wouldn't, is completely unacceptable, and there needs to be severe repercussions if they go ahead.
Let me put the final question to you, as I did to Sir Malcolm Rifkin. Given all of that, and I've listened very carefully to how you both believe that the NATO alliance has actually behaved more wisely and more crisply this time than it did last time, do you nevertheless entertain a fear that Putin has played us? He's going to end up with a little of what he wants, if not all?
No, I think as Malcolm very wisely said, he's going to end up, I think, if he goes ahead, in a very long-term war, quite a bloody war with a lot of casualties, Russians included, in Ukraine. There's no quick military fix to this if he goes ahead. And his economy obviously is going to suffer because the sanctions will be much tougher, and he will end up with a much reinforced NATO, with NATO really coming together and reinforcing itself all along the Baltics and perhaps in the Black Sea area as well. So I don't think he's playing us for fools. On the contrary, I think he's now getting the kind of response that will actually make the future of his country much more difficult. I much regret that, and I very much hope he will think again, even at the very 11th hour.
Sir Michael Fallon, thank you very much indeed. Really good of you to join us from home there, and thanks for coming on GB News. That's Michael Fallon, Sir Michael Fallon, the former Secretary of State for Defence. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends. Lots more coming up, including Sir Malcolm Rifkin's comments to one or two of your emails. Jam-packed already. But before that, let's have a very quick look at the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking windy with gales for many. Rain, heavy at times, will move southeast with showers following. Let's take a look at the details. Rain, turning heavy for a time, will steadily edge southeastwards. It will be windy with gales or severe gales likely, especially in coastal areas and with heavy rain. It'll become increasingly windy and gusty across the southeast. A band of rain will also encroach from the northwest, feeling mild despite the rain. South Wales will be wet with persistent and heavy rain edging southeast. It will also be windy with gales or severe gales around the coast. The conditions will be very similar across the northwest of England. Rain, which will be heavy for a time, will be accompanied with strong to gale force gusty winds. The heaviest of the rain will be clearing to the south for northeast of England. It will be drier in the north with some brighter spells, but also blustery showers. Windy here too. It'll be a little drier and brighter in Scotland, with some sunny spells possible. There will be blustery showers, which will be wintry over higher ground, feeling quite chilly too. There will be a mix of sunny spells and scattered blustery showers for Northern Ireland. The showers will be wintry at times, and it'll be windy with coastal gales. OK, so the rain will steadily clear southeast with showers following, wintry in the north and remaining windy for many, and that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's inching towards 12:30 and you're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News, TV and radio. Now, as you will have heard in the news bulletin just now, Buckingham Palace has confirmed that Her Majesty the Queen has tested positive for coronavirus. Joining us now to discuss this is Charles Ray, a good friend of mine and a good friend of the programme. Charles, it's one of those occasions, you know perfectly well, that your journalism hat goes on first and foremost. This is going to exercise lots and lots of folk around the country. What's your take when you first heard the news?
Well, surprised, because the last time she saw Prince Charles was 2 days before he had COVID on February the 8th. It's now February the 20th, so that's 12 days ago. I'm not too sure how long this lingers around before someone else catches it, but I'm a bit surprised. But, you know, the palace are being quite straight with her, I think, and saying that she's got mild cold-like symptoms and is being looked after. I'm sure she's been looked after very, very well indeed. And she is going to continue with light duties, which is good news. But I also suspect that all the people that she's been seeing in that intervening period, including those two military chaps that she saw, that we saw photographs of a few days ago, I think there'll be phone calls to them as well.
Perfected last time round the regal bubble, Her Majesty's, by appointment to Her Majesty, a bubble. Let's reassure folk, if we can, that Her Majesty is in the best possible hands. Sure. And every measure will have been taken to keep her safe.
Yes, and as far as I'm aware, that bubble still exists in effect. You know, she sees her son proves positive for COVID 2 days later. There's not much anybody could do about that. But you're absolutely right. She's in that bubble. She's in the best place at all with Windsor Castle. She's got the doctors there. She's got medical care. She's got all the people around her that she needs to have around her. And I'm sure, you know, at the age of 95, they will be taking all the precautions that need to be taken, you know, with Her Majesty.
Final point on that aspect is that if it were any other person of that age, you'd say, oh, well, she's in that vulnerable territory. Unlike her late sister and indeed her mum, relatively speaking, this is a very clean-living, healthy, loves to horse ride woman. She's in a pretty good state of health.
Oh, she is a marvellous state of health. I mean, we in the pictures that we were talking about when she saw the defence guys, we saw her with a walking stick, and she was saying, "Oh, I can't move." I mean, obviously, it's a bit difficult now. You know, her mobility is not as great as it used to be, but she's led a very, very healthy life throughout her life. It's quite incredible. You should quite rightly say, unlike her sister and mother, and her mother lived to 100 plus, 101, so she hasn't done too badly.
Yes, indeed. Du bonnet and gin, the great elixir. The other thing that struck me, and actually you said it almost in passing at the beginning, but I want to share your thoughts in a little bit more detail with those who are good enough to be watching us or listening to us. And that is the point about the palace having been straight with us. It's quite a big deal for the palace to make a health statement about the most senior member of the royal family. That's quite a cautious decision.
It is a very cautious decision, and of course we were all clamouring after the announcement of Prince Charles, how was the Queen and everything else, and they were using the old, well, we don't discuss medical matters. Well, clearly they are now discussing medical matters as she's proved positive. I suspect that's been done partially because she may well have had some audiences with some people that will now have to be put on the back burner. And so, yes, it's quite good that they have been straight with us. And I think COVID nowadays is much softer than it was right at the beginning, 2 years ago. So that's good news as well for Her Majesty. All we can do is wish her well, speedy recovery, and hopefully we'll be seeing her again soon.
Charles, thanks for coming to Zoom with us at such short notice. It is a breaking story. There are few in the business better than you for dealing with that, and I'm really grateful. Thank you very much indeed. Charles Ray, the former court correspondent of the Sun newspaper and an old mate of mine from way back when we were industrial correspondents, being a good journalist there, measured judgments. Let's share now with you the full statement that Charles and I were just discussing that has come from Buckingham Palace. I think we can show it to you now. Her Majesty is experiencing mild cold-like symptoms, but expects to continue light duties at Windsor over the coming week. She will continue to receive medical attention and will follow all the appropriate guidelines. Measured, sound, but informative. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends, TV and radio. Plenty more to come this afternoon, including our Rural Spotlight feature. And this week we're discussing the pressures that our wonderful vets are facing. But first, let's bring you right up to date with the news. Here once again is Ray Addison.
Thanks, Alistair. It's 12:33. Buckingham Palace has confirmed that the Queen has tested positive for COVID. In a statement, the Palace said Her Majesty is experiencing mild, cold-like symptoms, but expects to carry out light duties this week. The head of state, who's 95, tested positive after coming in direct contact with her eldest son and heir, the Prince of Wales, the week he had the virus. The announcement comes just a few weeks after the nation's longest reigning monarch reached her historic Platinum Jubilee of 70 years on the throne. Buckingham Palace says she will continue to receive medical attention and follow all the appropriate guidelines. And we'll have more on this breaking story here on GB News as it develops. The Prime Minister has warned that a Russian invasion of Ukraine would be the biggest conflict in Europe since World War II. This morning, explosions were heard in the rebel-held city of Donetsk in the east of the country, and the military reported the death of 2 soldiers. President Volodymyr Zelensky is calling for talks with Russia's Vladimir Putin in a bid to ease tensions. An amber weather warning has been issued for Northern Ireland, with Storm Franklin now hitting the UK. It comes just 2 days after Storm Eunice caused what providers say was the biggest national power outage on record. Yellow weather warnings are also in place for Wales and most of England, with winds of up to 70 miles per hour expected to cause more problems. The legal requirement to self-isolate if you test positive for COVID is set to end this week. Downing Street says the Prime Minister will lift the restriction by Friday as part of his Living with COVID plan. And they've done it. Great Britain has claimed its first Olympic curling gold medal in 20 years. The women's team dominated the final against Japan to win 10-3. The royal family tweeted their congratulations, adding it was a fantastic end to the Games. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Alastair Stewart and Friends.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News TV and radio. It's 23 minutes to 1. And we are dealing now with a breaking story. We've plenty more still to come this afternoon, don't worry, including our Rural Spotlight feature and discussing the pressure on our wonderful vets. But we're going to give you more now on the breaking news that Her Majesty has, and I quote, let's pop the statement up. There we have it. Don't like to get these things wrong. It is important. Her Majesty is experiencing mild cold-like symptoms, but expects to continue light duties at Windsor over the coming week. She will, the palace goes on, continue to receive medical attention and will follow all of the appropriate guidelines. So there you have it. Carefully chosen words, mild symptoms, continue with her duties. But as Charles Ray and I were just discussing, an interesting decision that despite mildness and busyness, they have decided to put that statement out. If you follow these matters either on the news or on social media, you will see just a couple of days ago that Her Majesty had one of her first face-to-face audiences. That was with an outgoing senior military guy and the person who was taking over his job. Brief chats and talks there. She also, I think, did a couple of down-the-line conversations with people like new ambassadors coming along. So, yeah, she's been doing fine and she's been working hard at it. But both Prince Charles and also Camilla had tested positive and had to isolate and obviously had spent a good deal of time with Her Majesty. Now, I'm not a medic, so I don't know who gave what to whom, but if you just look at the basic evidence of it, then perhaps it was quite likely that Her Majesty would pick up the bug and would test positive, and that is exactly what has happened. And my final observation on it, and we've got other people we're lining up to chat to see if we can follow further developments, is the point that Charles Ray underlined, and that is the palace have taken a decision to share that information with you. It is your right that you should know that, but have chosen those words so carefully that the symptoms are mild and the duties will be light, but they will continue. If there are any further developments on that story, we'll be right back on top of it, particularly if there's any further word either from the palace itself or possibly a member of the royal family who's out and about. So don't worry, you won't lose it if that's the one that you're most interested in. We'll be coming back to it, and also it'll be in all of Ray's news bulletins as well. Now, for those who live in towns and cities, it can be pretty easy to lose touch with what's going on in the countryside and indeed the world of farming, agriculture and animals. So each week we check in with those at the forefront of our rural communities. Now this week, we're looking at the people who look after our beloved furry friends, the vets. Many are facing burnout because of the influx of pets that they're now expected to see on a daily basis due to the boom in people buying pets during lockdown. Well, joining me now to discuss this is Anita Dow. Anita is an emergency vet from Vets Now. This started off when my wife spotted an article in the Observer magazine last weekend talking about the pressures that folk like you are working under. I've got to come and deal with it now, even to the point of people leaving the profession and worse. I mean, all creatures great and small, it isn't. But how bad has it become?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Now, I suppose the article that came out last weekend is not a surprise to anyone within the industry, close friends or family of people who work in the industry. It's definitely one of the first times that it has been spoken about publicly, and it has definitely been getting worse over the last couple of years. But this is a situation that our industry has been facing for as long as I can remember, and I've been a vet for 13 years and a nurse for 5 before that.
Understand, but that you said in passing there the last couple of years, and that's COVID, that's the COVID period. In your experience, and you talk to these people face to face, is it someone says, oh, I'm lonely, I'm on my own during COVID, I'll buy a cat, I'll buy a dog, or something even bigger or smaller, and now things are getting better, oh, I can't cope, or actually keeping a pet is a lot more expensive than I thought it was going to be?
I think we've got a number of things that are leading to it. I think we've got a lot of people decided to purchase pets during lockdown because they were going to be home more and potentially didn't put enough preparation or thought into what pet ownership does mean and the huge responsibility that is. But also, I find that definitely during COVID times, it's not just that it's the pressure of having that pet. We're seeing a lot of people under stress because of COVID-related things, and their ability to communicate with kindness, whether it's in the vet industry or other people-facing industries. Every industry has noticed it, that communication through kindness has really reduced during this really stressful time. But we've had we have lost a lot of vets to the industry also because of Brexit and travel restrictions. But it's just a little bit of a perfect storm. And I definitely don't believe that the cost of veterinary treatment is the sole cause at all.
No, I wasn't suggesting that, and I know people can take out insurance policies if they've got the money, but the idea, oh, just go and buy a lovely little kitten and that's the end of it. It isn't, because there are all sorts of other things, if you're going to do it properly as an owner, that you've got to take into account. And we've got horses, donkeys, cats, dogs, a lot, so tell me about it. I want to take you one step back, because I'm intrigued by this. Your job is one I've never come across. We have vets for the horses, we have vets for the dogs and what have you, but that's a kind of 9 to 5 like a GP surgery. You're an emergency vet, so does that mean that the calls that you get are even more fractious and panicky and, to be honest, downright rude?
So we have a whole array. We can get more just concerned clients looking for advice as far as things, trying to decide if they need to be seen urgently. But then, yes, as far as a ratio, we do see a much higher proportion of emergency cases. So emotions are running a lot higher. The urgency to have treatment is much higher. And so the emotions that go along with those types of situations are obviously running a lot higher for owners in those situations.
Well, I wish you well, and I mean that. And I hope the rest of us learn to be nicer when we have a problem and learn to assess our responsibilities as owners as well. Anita Dow, lovely to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Anita is, as I said there at the end, an emergency vet from Vets Now. We'll be talking about that subject with another vet a little bit later on in the programme. But let me just remind you of our top story, our breaking news today, and that is that the Queen, Her Majesty, has tested positive for COVID-19. Buckingham Palace says that the monarch is experiencing, and I quote, mild cold-like symptoms, but is expected to continue light duties at Windsor this week. Grant Harold is a former royal butler to Prince Charles, who had COVID himself just a few weeks ago, and is a good friend of this programme and indeed a good friend of GB News. Great to see you. First of all, quite genuinely, just as a bloke who's worked for this family, what was your reaction when you heard that news about Her Majesty in the last hour or so?
Good afternoon, Alistair. Yes, I was actually just out and about there when I got the news, and completely shocked, because even though I've known many people have had it, as we all have, sadly we've lost people, obviously with COVID, it was that shock of hope she's okay. Literally, you know, that shock. Just praying that she'll be okay. And thankfully, obviously, the Palace have said it's mild symptoms. But the other thing that amazed me was the Palace have actually made this announcement quite quickly, because, as you know, they don't very often give out kind of notices about the members of the royal family and their health. This is quite significant. They've actually let everyone know at this stage that she has contracted the virus.
Give us an insider's view without breaching confidences. I respect that, and I know that you do very sharply as well. But give us a sense of what the buzz would be like right now in the royal household. Her Majesty tests positive. She's okay. It's only mild symptoms. She's going to try and carry on. What's the buzz like?
I think there will be a lot of concern. I mean, obviously, with Prince Charles recently having the virus, the Duchess of Cornwall having it, there's always been that concern, because obviously Prince Charles was with the Queen just before he obviously contracted the virus. And I think there was obviously a concern, and without any question, even within the Palace, there would be concerns, which is why they'll be making sure that she's doing these regular checks. And the fact that now they know she's got it, they're going to do everything like any of us would do for any of our loved ones. They're going to do everything to make sure that she is safe. They'll obviously keep an eye on this, and hopefully, God willing, that she will be okay.
And final point to get your take. I mean, you weren't in the press office, but you all work together as part of a team. They're the firm and you're the firm as well, working for them. The choice of those words, mild symptoms and light duties, that's a pretty clear signal from the Palace to the populace, is it not?
It is very clear. In fact, I was thinking about it because, as I said, it's such a big thing that they've actually made this announcement. And I think what they're trying to show is that the Queen is like all of us. She gets ill, she can get viruses, just like you and me, like all of us can get. And this is almost them saying that this is almost kind of to me, it's a unity thing. They're kind of saying that the Queen is like, with everything going on at the moment with the royal family, she's still able to get the same illnesses, diseases, things that we all get. And this is them actually making this announcement and actually saying the Queen's now got it. And like with any other family member, let's kind of support her and pray and hope that she gets through this. And as I've said, let's just pray that it continues to be mild symptoms.
I think we'd all echo that, Grant. Great to see you. Thank you very much indeed for breaking in.
Thank you, likewise.
To talk to us. That's Grant Harold, former butler to Prince Charles and William and Harry. Let's get more on this breaking story now that Her Majesty has tested positive for coronavirus. Friend of the show, friend of mine, Robert Jobson joins us live now. Robert, thanks very much indeed for fitting us in. I know you are a busy guy. We've known each other for years. Your reaction when you heard this news?
Well, I'm not quite as relaxed as many people because, of course, the Queen is 96 next month, and COVID, of course, is whether or not you've been vaccinated 3 times, as the Majesty has, it still has it has an impact, particularly on older people. So hopefully, I'm sure they're monitoring her. I don't monitor her very carefully. I would think the idea of light duties, well, I think she should probably be focused on her health rather than the light duties, and it is a concern, no doubt about that. And my feeling is that hopefully that she'll just focus on health and not work.
Yeah.
I can't hear you now, Alistair. I don't know what's happened.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yeah, sorry.
I just said you're a bit worried, aren't you?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I know a lot of people play it down, and everyone says that the Queen is, almost indestructible. But the fact is that her great age is relevant here, and the Palace won't say anything about health unless they feel they have to. Yes, Prince Charles has made it quite clear that when he had the virus, and he's done so on both occasions that he contracted it, and mainly because he was out and about. The Palace normally would not discuss the Queen's health, and they wouldn't say anything until they had something detailed to say. At this age, I would say that we should hopefully all be rooting for the Queen, and that she will be okay. At the moment, yes, she has mild symptoms, but we've seen in the past how quickly this virus can impact on people. It did upon the Prime Minister, and he continued to work initially when he had it, and he went downhill very, very quickly. So I just hope that the people around her advise her not to work and to simply to load the work on other people, and for her to simply concentrate on getting well.
Yeah. The final thought from you, and you've written brilliant royal biographies, but you're also top drawer court correspondent, and you know how these things work. Would this statement have been her decision, her press secretary's decision, her private secretary's decision, or Charles's decision?
Well, at the moment, I think we've got a royal family where the chairman of the board, of course, is the Queen, but the CEO is very much the Prince of Wales, who's been very open and clear about his position. But this would be a decision made by the Queen. The press secretary, Donald McCabe, came under quite a lot of pressure quite recently after a couple of incidents regarding the Queen's health, and quite rightly referred back to the patient confidentiality, and he wasn't, if he didn't wish to be released, it would be released. But I think in this particular instance, they've taken a decision based upon her being the head of state and her great age, and to try to allay fears, really, and to keep people calm and not worried. But at the same time, as I say, it's easy to sort of almost dismiss this because the Queen does seem almost indestructible. But I just hope that the focus, as I said, is on health and not her showing that she's keeping calm and carrying on, because sometimes the priority has to be health.
Measured and very thoughtful, as always, Robert Jobson. Thank you very much indeed. Hope you have a great afternoon, and thanks for sharing some of it with us here on GB News. Thank you, Robert Jobson, the royal biographer and royal reporter. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News. We'll be bringing you more on that story after the break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It is 5 to 1 and you are watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends on GB News, TV and radio. Let me bring you right up to date with the breaking news. Her Majesty the Queen has tested positive for COVID-19. The Palace has released the following statement. If we can just pop that on the put it up on the screen. They're talking about Her Majesty having experienced... No, we're not going to put the statement up, so let me just remind you. The statement talks about Her Majesty experiencing mild cold-like symptoms, but is expected to continue light duties at Windsor. There it is. Her Majesty is experiencing mild cold-like symptoms, but expects to continue light duties at Windsor over the coming week. She will continue to receive medical attention and will follow all the appropriate guidelines. So there you have the statement. Let's get more on that breaking story. I'm delighted to be joined now by Angela Levin. There she is, good friend of the programme, good friend of mine, and a very fine writer on all of these matters. Talked to Charles Ray and talked to Rob Johnson already about this. What I wanted particularly to talk to you about was to give me a sense of what's going on in Windsor Castle, which you know very, very well indeed. You know the routine and who's who. She couldn't be in a happier place as far as she's concerned. It is her favourite home other than Sandringham. She's in the best place. What will be going on, Angela?
Well, I think she will be cross if people make too much of a fuss about her, just like her husband was, and she will want to be seeing what everybody's saying about her, and she will poo-poo a lot, I imagine, and say, well, you know, it's not so bad, it's not so terrible. But I think that the message was really to protect us all, both Her Majesty and all her citizens who admire her and love her. Because when you're nearly 96, you don't know what can happen with anything that affects you. So these very mild cold-like symptoms might be that at the moment, but I think the reality is we need to be very aware and cautious about what happens next. I think she will watch a bit of telly, and she will talk to people who are in her bubble who actually aren't ill. I mean, we hear that so many of the people who are there to look after her have been affected by the COVID, and they don't know whether they're going to be very ill or partly ill, and so it's very difficult to understand what will happen next.
We know that when senior members of the royal family are seriously ill, as with the late Duke, they go to the King Edward Hospital in London, or in the case of Her Majesty the Queen Mother all those years back, off to Aberdeen Infirmary with a fishbone or whatever it might be. If she's staying in Windsor, is there a residential medical team there as well, or will her surgeon drop by as and when needed?
There's a bond of doctors, top doctors who are there, and that is their job. They don't actually stay in the castle, but they are absolutely there, and they're on the phone all the time. I mean, when Prince Philip was dying and for an hour or two, their lead doctor wasn't actually there. He was phoning them all the time, I was told. And that's right. They will be testing her temperature. They will be checking on her. And she will get the best care that is absolutely possible. She probably won't like all that fuss, but I think that they will look after her in a way that they should for someone so extraordinary and amazing as the Queen.
Responsibility. I mean, people often say duty is her middle name, but responsibility is as well. She's renowned for it. If somebody's giving her sound advice and it's a doctor, she'll do it. If it's silly advice, she'll dismiss it because it's silly advice. Does that tell us that she's a good patient?
Well, I think she doesn't like a fuss and she wants to keep working because that's what she's done all her life and that's what keeps her going. I think she will listen. She has listened. When she was told to do less a few months ago, she did less. And I think that her wish to be alive and to be able to enjoy the Platinum Jubilee in June, that she will not want to spoil it by trying to do too much. We don't know how well or unwell she feels at the moment. The number of incidents that you feel when you've got this virus are so broad that you can't tell from 1 hour to the next. But I think she will listen this time because she understands exactly how potentially dangerous it could be.
Angela Evan, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for breaking into your Sunday afternoon to share those reflective thoughts. Thank you very much indeed. Great Angela Levin there. And it is 1:30 I didn't want to interrupt Angela because she was ending there on a very important point. I would normally have stopped at 1. It's just coming up to 1:01. And you're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News TV and radio. Reminder of our top story that Angela and Robert and Charles and I have been discussing this morning. Her Majesty the Queen has tested positive for coronavirus, and we'll have plenty more to come on that, so do stay with us. Hello and welcome if you've just joined me. Hello and welcome back if you've been with us since 12 o'clock. The time now is just a little after 1:01. I am Alastair Stewart and we are into the final hour of our programme. We'll be keeping you company on television and radio. Plenty more still to come this afternoon. We'll, of course, keep focusing on that breaking news, the announcement from Buckingham Palace and people's reaction to it and any other developments on that. You will not miss a word of it. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of the news with Ray Addison, and I expect I know and you know where he's going to start.
Thanks, Alistair. Yes, it's 1:01. Buckingham Palace has confirmed that the Queen has tested positive for COVID. In a statement, the palace said Her Majesty is experiencing mild-like COVID symptoms, but expects to carry out light duty this week. The head of state, who's 95 years old, tested positive after coming in direct contact with her eldest son and heir, the Prince of Wales, the week he had the virus. The announcement comes just a few weeks after Her Majesty reached her historic Platinum Jubilee, marking 70 years on the throne. Buckingham Palace says she will continue to receive medical attention and follow all appropriate guidelines. Former royal editor at The Sun, Charles Ray, told GB News she'll be receiving the best possible care.
It's a bit difficult now. You know, her mobility is not as great as it used to be, but she's led a very, very healthy life. She's got the doctors there. She's got medical care. She's got all the people around her that she needs to have around her. And I'm sure, you know, at the age of 95, they will be taking all the precautions that need to be taken.
Well, Grant Harold, the former royal butler to Prince Charles, Prince William and Prince Harry, explained how he felt when he heard the news.
It was that shock of, I hope she's okay. Literally, you know, that shock. Just praying that she'll be okay. And thankfully, obviously, the palace have said it's mild symptoms. But the other thing that amazed me was the palace have actually made this announcement quite quickly because, as you know, they don't very often give out kind of notices about the members of the royal family and their health. This is quite significant. They've actually let everyone know at this stage that she has contracted the virus.
Well, meanwhile, the legal requirement to self-isolate if you test positive for COVID is set to end this week. Downing Street says the Prime Minister will lift the restriction by Friday as part of his Living with COVID plan. He'll tell MPs that the vaccine programme, testing and new treatments can be relied upon to keep the public safe. Senior NHS managers have criticised the move. The Prime Minister has warned that a Russian invasion of Ukraine would be the biggest conflict in Europe since World War II. This morning, explosions were heard in the rebel-held city of Donetsk in the east of the country, and the military reported the death of 2 soldiers. President Volodymyr Zelensky is calling for talks with Russia's Vladimir Putin in a bid to ease tensions. Former UK ambassador to Russia, Sir Tony Brenton, told GB News he doesn't think there will be a war.
I knew Putin when I was working as ambassador. He's a very, very cautious man. He knows that a war is a very dangerous and unpredictable action, which could, if it fails, bring down his regime. I think that what's going on is a continuation of what's been going on for the last few months, is rising pressure by Russia on the West to try to get a more substantial response to the various demands they put on the table than they've received so far.
An amber weather warning has been issued for Northern Ireland, with Storm Franklin hitting the UK today. It comes just 2 days after Storm Eunice caused what providers say was the biggest national power outage on record. Around 155,000 people are still without electricity. Yellow weather warnings are also in place for Wales and most of England, with winds of up to 70 miles per hour expected to cause more problems. A passenger who was among 12 missing people has been rescued from a burning ferry. The fire on the Italian-flagged Euroferry Olympic, which was sailing from Greece to Italy, started in the early hours of Friday morning. Rescuers discovered the survivor on the stern of the vessel as it was being towed towards Corfu. 11 people are still unaccounted for. A helicopter has crashed dangerously close to swimmers on a crowded beach in Miami. No one on the beach was injured, but 2 of the 3 people on board were taken to a hospital. They're said to be in a stable condition. And they've done it. Great Britain has won its first Olympic curling gold medal in 20 years. The women's team dominated the final against Japan to win 10-3. The royal family tweeted their congratulations, adding it was a fantastic end to the Games. Captain Eve Muirhead says it was a proud moment.
Feel phenomenal. It's a moment that we're going to remember forever. This team has put in a fantastic shift this week. We're very proud of each other, and yeah, we can't wait to celebrate together.
Nice to end on some nice news. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Ray, thank you very much indeed. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News TV and radio, and thank you very much indeed for so doing. A reminder, it topped Ray's story, and we are keeping to watch it throughout the rest of my programme as well. The breaking news that the Queen has tested positive for COVID-19. Buckingham Palace says the monarch is experiencing mild cold-like symptoms, but is expected to continue light duties at Windsor this week. I'm delighted to be joined now by a royal correspondent and former press secretary at the palace, my good friend Dickie Arbiter. Dickie, you know this perhaps more intimately than many in the sense of the decision-making process. How would that have developed to make sure that each word, comma and dot was properly chosen so that the palace get the story out but don't frighten the population?
Well, very simply, is by coming up with the facts as they are, that yes, she has tested positive for COVID. She does have mild cold symptoms, which is symptomatic with anybody who has tested positive, having had 3 jabs, and that she will continue to undertake light duties being she will go through her red boxes, official papers. She might even Zoom. She might feel well enough to do that in an audience. That remains to be seen. But at the moment, she is 95 going on 96. I was asked earlier, is there concern? I think concern for her age, but the fact that she has been inoculated and vaccinated 3 times sort of slightly diminishes that cause for concern.
It is interesting. 1 or 2 other people have been commenting and observing that it comes the day before the Prime Minister is expected to lift pretty well all remaining COVID restrictions, including testing and the need for isolation. And yet the royal family assiduously have stuck by all of those rules up to now. And the statement repeats that she will abide by all of the regulations as set. It's a family that doesn't muck about when health is at stake.
No, it doesn't muck about when health is at stake. And yes, they've stuck assiduously to the regulations. I mean, nobody can forget that picture of the Queen sitting in the choir stalls at St George's Chapel at the funeral of her husband, the late Prince Philip, sticking to the regulations, social distancing. So they have stuck to the rules. I think the problem is that there are other members within Windsor Castle who have contracted COVID, which means that, it might have been pretty virulent, that the people that she comes in direct contact with haven't tested positive, but those sort of on the edge have, and the virus has spread its way into the rest of the household.
Yeah. Dickie, stay exactly where you are, and you'll hear what I say next, because we're breaking into our conversation, which we will then continue, because the Prime Minister Boris Johnson has tweeted, and I quote, "I'm sure I speak for everyone in wishing Her Majesty the Queen a swift recovery from COVID and a rapid return to vibrant good health." He continues, "COVID will not suddenly disappear, and we need to learn to live with this virus and continue to protect ourselves without restricting our freedom." And also the Leader of the Opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, says, "On behalf of myself and the whole of the Labour Party, wishing Her Majesty the Queen good health and a speedy recovery. Get well soon, ma'am," they both say. Dickie, interesting. Again, you and I have been around for so long that when the Prime Minister and the Leader of Her Majesty's Opposition choose to comment upon it, it just underlines the fact that this is not just a throwaway line. This is a serious matter that we need to watch, but not overreact to.
You're absolutely right, not overreact, but certainly watch. You know, we've gone through 2 years of a pandemic, almost 2 years. Countless people have died. There are still people going down positive. There are still people suffering it who've not been vaccinated. And it's not going to go away. We're going to have to learn to live with it, even though the sort of tight rules and regulations are going to be falling away fairly shortly. But yes, they have both commented, both the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition. We are talking, after all, about our head of state, our 95-year-old Queen, who is celebrating this year her Platinum Jubilee, and she's going on 96. So, you know, there is the age factor attached to it as well. But there's also, as far as the rest of the country concerned, she is our head of state. We've all grown up with her, and we all want to wish her well.
Tell me this, and you're one of the few people who genuinely will be able to answer the question. When you've got something like your Platinum Jubilee, the only person in the world for the first time ever, does it give her, I mean, she had the same with the Golden Jubilee, Silver Jubilee and those other huge, massive events in her lifetime. Does that draw her to it and give her a kind of renewed impetus, or does she just take these things in her stride?
Well, there's an element of both, actually, taking it in her stride. I mean, after all, you know, people used to say to me when I was working at the palace, even before and even now, how does she celebrate her accession? Well, she doesn't celebrate her accession because her accession came about with the death of her father, King George VI. But she knows that Platinum Jubilee, any Jubilee, is a milestone in one's life. She knows people want to celebrate. She knows that there are going to be celebrations over that long weekend, 2nd to the 5th of June, and she wants to celebrate along with everybody else. Everybody likes the idea of marking an occasion, whether it's a street party or a bit of a knees up outside Buckingham Palace. She's aware of that, and she wants to join in the fun. Not quite the knees up, but she certainly wants to join in the fun, certainly on the Sunday when there's the big pageant, but all the other things are attached to it as well. So, yes, she's going to gather with the momentum, but right up to then, there are several months and there are going to be several engagements. And I think there's a general expectation and a hope that she will be able to undertake 1 or 2 engagements around the country. But that, again, depends on the state of her health.
Yeah.
We've seen her a couple of days ago with the help, not using the stick to walk, just using it as a bit of a prop, but saying, you know, to the 2 Defence Services secretaries, in other words, come to me because I can't come to you, I can't walk, I can't move. So, you know, we have to take that into consideration. But there is a general expectation, I think people around the country, they would like to see her. She was once reputed to have said, "I have to be seen to be believed." That was a time when security was being discussed, and she mentioned it to one of her staff. She has to be seen to be believed without the sort of massive security around her like they have around presidents in the United States. So there is an expectation. We want to see her and we wish her well.
I agree with all of that. Final point, I'm going to tempt you. I mean, it's not breaching any confidences. It's just that you know and I don't. When you have a challenge like this for the household, be it at Windsor or at Buckingham, but we know we're at Windsor Castle, Buckingham Palace rather, we know we're at Windsor Castle, who's actually in charge of orchestrating everything that Her Majesty needs? Because you've got the Master of the Household, you've got the Private Secretary, you've got heads of this, that and the other. Who actually says, right, here's what we're doing, guys?
Well, as far as the Windsor Castle is concerned and everything that's happening in Windsor Castle, that's the master of the household. As far as the Queen's activities are concerned, whether it's work coming in, work going out, audiences, that's up to the private secretary. With the help of a deputy private secretary and an equerry. But at the end of the day, as far as the building and everything in the building is concerned, the food, the entertainment, and everything attached to it, that is the master of the household. So it's a team effort. It's not just one person, it is a team, and the team works extremely well.
All right, Dickie. Thank you very much indeed. It's really good to talk to you, and I know that you're a much in demand man for obvious reasons, but thanks for sharing some of your Sunday afternoon with us here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My good friend Dickie Arbiter there, former press secretary in the palace and top-class royal commentator, like all of my previous guests on the subject. There'll be plenty more to come this afternoon on Alastair Stewart and Friends. After the break, we'll be continuing the conversation on the breaking news that Her Majesty has indeed tested positive for COVID. Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, says we must learn to live with this virus as it is not going anywhere soon. More after the break for the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking windy with gales for many. Rain, heavy at times, will move southeast with showers following. Let's take a look at the details. Rain, turning heavy for a time, will steadily edge southeastwards. It will be windy with gales or severe gales likely, especially in coastal areas and with heavy rain. It'll become increasingly windy and gusty across the southeast. A band of rain will also encroach from the northwest, feeling mild despite the rain. South Wales will be wet with persistent and heavy rain edging southeast. It will also be windy with gales or severe gales around the coast. The conditions will be very similar across the northwest of England. Rain, which will be heavy for a time, will be accompanied with strong to gale force gusty winds. The heaviest of the rain will be clearing to the south for northeast of England. It will be drier in the north with some brighter spells, but also blustery showers. Windy here too. It'll be a little drier and brighter in Scotland with some sunny spells possible. There will be blustery showers, which will be wintry over higher ground, feeling quite chilly too. There will be a mix of sunny spells and scattered blustery showers for Northern Ireland. The showers will be wintry at times and it'll be windy with coastal gales. OK, so the rain will steadily clear southeast with showers following, wintry in the north and remaining windy for many, and that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So Howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's exactly 20 minutes past 1 and you're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News. Now, rest assured, we'll be bringing you more on the breaking news of Her Majesty having tested positive as the remain of this programme goes on, and also Ray will have the latest news in his bulletin as well. But we're also concentrating on another big event that's a global event too, and that is the Ukraine crisis. Now, Boris Johnson's been speaking to leaders and says that evidence suggests that Russia is planning the biggest war in Europe since 1945. The US government suggests that there are between 169,000 and 190,000 Russian troops stationed at Ukraine's border, both in Russia and neighbouring Belarus. But I've been asking, has the West actually been played in all of this? And I'm delighted to be joined live now in the studio with a very good friend of mine, Niall Gardner, who is the director of the Margaret Thatcher Centre for Freedom at the Heritage Foundation and finds himself in London, so we grab him when we can. Either Russia invades, Niall, and the West gets angry, or the West says Ukraine won, but it won't be joining NATO and Russia doesn't invade. Either way, Putin's won.
Well, an extraordinary time, and as the Prime Minister said earlier today, you know, we are facing the biggest war on European soil since World War II. I do think that all of the intelligence evidence at the moment indicates that an invasion is highly likely in the course of the next week or so. Yeah. That's certainly the assessment on the ground of Washington, is the assessment on the ground here in London.
But massive American forces arriving in the last 12 hours in Poland. Also further British forces arriving in neighbouring countries, including up in the Baltics. Not a British boot or an American boot, formally, in Ukraine. We've conceded it. We're saying, have Ukraine, but no further.
Well, that's a very important point. And it is, of course, very vital, I think, that we're sending US and British forces to Eastern Europe at this time, especially to reinforce the Baltic states and Poland. But the reality is that certainly, you know, Joe Biden's overall strategy has been to react to a likely Russian invasion rather than to deter it. Yeah. And I think that has been, you know, the big mistake on the US side. And Biden was very, very slow to act, actually. And Russian forces were already massing on the Ukrainian border last year, as early as March.
I mean, you're an expert in British politics as well as American politics. I think the thing that frightened me most in that analysis, which I share, is I can almost imagine Biden saying, well, yeah, it's like that. That's Europe's problem. You worry about the Ukraine. I've got bigger fish to fry with China, Taiwan, Japan, and that country across the Pacific from me.
Well, certainly, of course, the world superpower has to consider a wide range of adversaries and threats. I don't think Biden actually has an overall strategy for confronting both Russia and China. There is no overall strategic thinking here. And I do think that Biden has failed significantly on the Russian front. His refusal, for example, to sanction Nord Stream 2, that pipeline was a huge strategic error of judgment that emboldened the Russians. At the same time, of course, the Russians and the Chinese are increasingly acting together as an axis. And I think we're seeing, the strongest partnership between Beijing and Moscow in many, many decades. And the United States...
Well, even to the point where people are saying that when the Olympics end, I think at 2 o'clock today, that ironically may be the signal for Putin to say, OK, if I'm going to invade, I'm going to do it now, because I don't want to steal any thunder from my good buddy President Xi.
Yeah, it's an excellent point, because, of course, the Russians and the Chinese are coordinating very, very closely, not only over Ukraine, but also over a whole range of foreign policy matters from Taiwan to Iran as well. And so, we have an extraordinary situation whereby our two biggest adversaries are emboldened, they're united. And this could well be the legacy of, Biden's overall sort of weak-kneed foreign policy, actually. So these are incredibly dangerous.
If I'm right in my theoretical question, has the West been played by Putin? The answer I can draw from your last comment, and that is the answer is yes, because Putin read Biden better than Biden read the situation.
Yeah, I think certainly Putin read Biden well, and Putin viewed Biden as a pushover, as a weak-kneed figure, especially in the wake of the Afghanistan withdrawal, for example, which is an absolute catastrophe for US leadership on the international stage. He read in that Biden didn't have the stomach for the fight. He even gave in to a far lesser adversary in Afghanistan and allowed the Taliban to return to power. What message does that send, of course, to the Russians? An extremely dangerous one. And so the Russians are incredibly emboldened right now. And, of course, you have the useless, European Union response, the appeasement strategy of the Germans, the French, of course, keen to strike a deal with Moscow. And so, you have poor leadership in Washington. You have atrocious leadership in Europe. Apart from, of course, the British response has been very robust. It's been very good. But most of Europe has been kowtowing to the Russians, actually. And so the Russians feel emboldened by that. So it's an extraordinarily deadly set of circumstances that we see. Weak leadership on both sides of the Atlantic, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, as many have said, he's won a Pyrrhic victory in the sense he's the centre of attention now, and he just loves that, and he can start dictating it. But I've mentioned to you when you came into the studio that I thought one of the standout pieces in today's newspapers is the Mail on Sunday interview with Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, where Liz says, if Russia gets Ukraine, Putin gets Ukraine, he won't rest. It'll be the Baltics, the old Soviet states. There are more US troops in Poland, but none in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. I mean, Liz is worried about the expansionist view, and that's a worry I share.
Yeah, actually, I do think Liz Truss is right here. And if Putin succeeds in taking most of Ukraine or the entire country, he will set his sights certainly upon the Baltic states next. And I met with a senior Eastern European delegation in Washington this week. They were warning about Russian intentions towards Lithuania. Yeah. Lithuania is the weak link in the Baltic states. And so this may not be the end of it. And so it's absolutely right that the Foreign Secretary is pointing out that Putin's ambitions go far beyond Ukraine. In many respects, a Ukraine war is a test case for a larger conflict in Europe. And so we cannot underestimate in any way the broader Russian threat, even against the borders of the NATO alliance itself.
Very, very briefly, Truss doing well, Wallace doing well, Johnson recovered?
Yes, I think certainly we've seen a turning point for the Prime Minister. He has been a very strong leader on the Ukraine-Russia front. In fact, by far the strongest leader in Europe. And I do think that the Prime Minister's prospects for long-term survival are significantly stronger today than when we last talked about a month ago.
Niall Gardner, always a pleasure to see you. Whenever you're passing through London,
to see you.
Let me know. We'll have a chat. There's always something we
Alistair.
can discuss usefully. Thank you very much indeed. My friend Niall Gardner there, director of the Margaret Thatcher Centre for Freedom at the Heritage Foundation in Washington, but fortunately here with us live in London today. Let's get more now on the big story of the day, that the Queen has coronavirus. And joining me now is GB News' royal reporter, my very good friend Cameron Walker. Cameron, we haven't spoken to you before now because you have been busy on the phone, busy on the wires. Give me your take of where we stand at the moment. We've read the statement from the palace. We've had the PM and the Leader of the Opposition and others giving their comments. What's your take?
Yes, Alistair. Well, we know that statement came at around 11:45 this morning from Buckingham Palace. We also know that the Queen did have direct contact with the Prince of Wales the week he had the disease. He emerged from isolation on Thursday, and that was his second bout of the illness. Now, COVID symptoms can appear anytime between 2 and 14 days after exposure. Now, a palace source has told me this morning that a number of staff have indeed also tested positive for coronavirus within the Windsor Castle bubble, which would suggest that Prince Charles may not be the only one to have potentially exposed the Queen to the virus, or indeed, the one to have exposed her. Now, people understandably are concerned because the Queen is, of course, 95 years old. She turns 96 in April, in just a couple of weeks' time. But we are led to believe that she has had 3 jabs, which could ease people's concerns. But I think the fact that Buckingham Palace has said in the statement that she is continuing with light duties during the time that she has coronavirus would suggest that the virus hasn't affected her all that much. And I'm sure that no doubt palace officials are still very much preparing for her Jubilee celebrations, Platinum Jubilee celebrations later this year.
Fascinating when you said about talking to all of your sources, and I know you have been, but that's why I explained why we were talking to you now rather than earlier on before you'd made all of the calls. I had fascinatingly nuanced responses from Robert Jobson and Charles Ray about the decision to issue the statement, clarity with the public or concern we better actually get this one out there. What's the vibe that you're picking up, not on the content of the statement so much as the decision to actually issue a statement at all?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, Alistair? Because I remember when the Prince of Wales did test positive for the virus for a second time, and we knew the palace confirms that he was in direct contact with Her Majesty the Queen. They did actually refuse to say whether or not the Queen has also tested positive. I think the fact that they have released a statement here today does suggest that they are trying to be as transparent as possible with the monarch's health. We are led to believe as well that she is tested every day for coronavirus. Of course, she has lots of meetings with various palace officials. Just last week, I think it was Wednesday, we saw that she had a meeting with 2 military officials where she had said that famous line, "As you can see, I can't move," when she had her walking stick and she was asked how she was. So I think it just shows that the spirit of Her Majesty, the fact that she has that good old British spirit of keeping calm and carrying on, even the fact that she does have COVID suggests that she wants to be as transparent as possible with the public. But of course, the palace always maintains the fact that health is a private matter, and there are 2 different sides to the Queen, her public life and private life. So I think they would like us to respect her medical privacy and will give us updates when necessary.
It is extraordinary. It's not remotely a royal word to use, but Her Majesty is a mistress of banter, because I do remember exactly the scene that you're describing, but not that long ago, General Snick Carter, when he stood down as Chief of the Defence Staff and came in his fabulous morning attire of a very senior general, there was much mirth between Her Majesty, Nick, and the fact that there was a poodle in there as well for the audience. I don't mean a poodle at all. I mean a corgi. Sorry.
Yes. It was actually a cross. It was a dorgie. Yes. Yes. Her name. The dog's name is Candy, and I believe those 2 military officials she met on Wednesday also had a run-in with her, and said that she was standing guard. I think the Queen and her pet have a strong bond between the 2 of them.
People who are with us on television are seeing lovely pictures of Her Majesty going about her duties. This one we're just looking at on television is with, I think that's Prince Edward there in the middle, perhaps something to do with the Duke of Edinburgh's award scheme or something. Simply putting a picture in there, which folk listening to us on radio can't see, of a busy, active woman, but a woman who is still in her mid-90s. And therefore, we need to be measured, we need to be sensible about it, but we need to be factual as well, Cameron.
Yes, as you say, Alistair, she is in her mid-90s, but she is also our head of state. She is Her Majesty the Queen, she is our monarch, and she is going to continue duties for the rest of her life. And long may it continue. Those pictures you were referring to there of her and Prince Edward outside the gates of Buckingham Palace was in fact the start of the Queen's Commonwealth baton relay for the Birmingham 2022 Commonwealth Games. And she does plan, as we've been told, to carry out a number of duties in the run-up to the Jubilee, and she will continue with duties for a long time to come. But that doesn't take away from the fact that doctors last year did order her to rest. She missed the Remembrance Sunday service at the Cenotaph in November last year due to a sprained back. And she also she also had a reception with business leaders back in October, and she spent a night in hospital. And I think the palace did try to cover up the fact that she was spending a night in hospital for what they call preliminary investigations, because they didn't want to panic or worry the public. But I think also the public do kind of want a right to know what is going on with the health of the monarch. But I think for now she is staying strong and carrying on, keeping calm and carrying on even though the fact that she has coronavirus, she is going to continue with duties as she has done all her life, Alistair.
Absolutely spot on, Cameron. I will now release you with gratitude and thanks to get back on your phone and keep in touch with your courtier colleagues and friends who will keep you up to date so we can keep GB News viewers and listeners up to date as well. You are indeed watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News TV and radio at 26 minutes to 2. We've plenty more still to come this afternoon, but first of all, let's give you the news.
Thanks, Alistair. It's 1:34. Buckingham Palace has confirmed the Queen has tested positive for COVID. In a statement, the palace said Her Majesty is experiencing mild, cold-like symptoms, but expects to carry out light duties this week. The head of state, who's 95, tested positive after coming in direct contact with her eldest son and heir, the Prince of Wales, the week he had the virus. The announcement comes just a few weeks after the nation's longest reigning monarch reached her historic platinum jubilee of 70 years on the throne. Buckingham Palace says she will continue to receive medical attention and follow all the appropriate guidelines. The Prime Minister has warned that a Russian invasion of Ukraine would be the biggest conflict in Europe since World War II. This morning, explosions were heard in the rebel-held city of Donetsk in the east of the country, and the military reported the death of 2 soldiers. President Volodymyr Zelensky is calling for talks with Russia's Vladimir Putin in a bid to ease tensions. An amber weather warning has been issued for Northern Ireland, with Storm Franklin now hitting the UK. It comes just 2 days after Storm Eunice caused what providers say was the biggest national power outage on record. Yellow weather warnings are also in place for Wales and most of England, with winds of up to 70 miles per hour expected to cause more problems. And they've done it. Great Britain has claimed its first Olympic curling gold medal in 20 years. The women's team dominated the final against Japan to win 10-3. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 22 minutes to 2 and you are watching Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News, TV and radio. Let me bring you up to date with the breaking news that we're covering, and that is the announcement from Buckingham Palace that Her Majesty has tested positive for COVID. They issued a statement a couple of hours ago, and there it is. Her Majesty is experiencing mild cold-like symptoms, but expects to continue light duties at Windsor over the coming week. She'll continue to receive medical attention and will follow all the appropriate guidelines. The Prime Minister has tweeted, "I'm sure I speak for everyone in wishing Her Majesty the Queen a swift recovery from COVID and a rapid return to vibrant good health." He continues, "COVID will not suddenly disappear, and we need to learn to live with this virus and continue to protect ourselves without restricting our freedoms." And don't forget, he's due to make a big statement about precisely that when the House of Commons returns from the break on Monday. The Leader of the Opposition, Her Majesty's Opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, has also tweeted, and Keir says, "On behalf of myself and the whole of the Labour Party, wishing Her Majesty the Queen good health and a speedy recovery. Get well soon, ma'am," he says. Well, joining me now is Di Davis, good friend of this programme, former head of Royal Protection, and there he is. Di, great to see you. How good a client is she when suddenly she has to not do some things and do some other things that she doesn't necessarily like to do? Does she take it well?
Well, from my knowledge, and it is a slightly old knowledge now, yes is the answer. She's a very pragmatic woman who has been around far longer than most of us. And clearly, she's a woman of huge common sense. And I think, as always, she will be guided by those experts surrounding her and the best medical advice possible, I would imagine.
Having served the institution for as long as you did, and I completely accept that point, that it was a wee while ago that you were actually at the front line, that leads me to my second question, the degree to which, when you saw that statement this morning and the detail it goes into, the symptoms, the duties and what have you, that's quite a shift forward for the Palace, isn't it, to be more candid, more open with her subjects?
Well, it's a fair point, but I think if you look back at this horrendous week she's had, it must put a huge strain on anyone. But for a 95-year-old going on 96 on the 21st of April, what has this had in any effect on her? And I think if you are stressed or you're worrying about issues, COVID can have that effect. I've had COVID, and it's not a pleasant. So I'm delighted that they say that the symptoms are mild. But she's such an incredible woman, I think, guided, and I think she has got some good advisors, unlike some of her children. I think she will come through this as she hopefully always does.
It's a fascinating balance that you address head on there, that balance between us wanting her to do as much as possible, and indeed her wanting to do as much as possible, and somebody having the confidence to say, with respect, ma'am, I think you need to ease back a little bit.
Yes, well, one of the things that my officers did was they would advise her in terms of protection and security, and that's why, modestly, they were so good. They have that ability diplomatically to advise senior members and junior members. It's unfortunate that some of them didn't listen to that advice, or didn't, as we now know, get good advice. And I say again, that must have had some huge effect on Her Majesty. Wise, undoubtedly, she is.
Yeah. I'm not going to go down the road of junior members of the family as well, but I just want you to know that I know exactly what you're talking about, but perhaps that's for another conversation at another time. This is a more technical question, and help me on it if you will. I'm used to seeing people like your good self and your colleagues and successors when a senior member of the royal family is out and about, discreetly there, ready to look after him or her. Are you also in the royal households, in Windsor Castle, for example?
If you mean, are there protection officers there as well as the uniform who guard the outer perimeters, the answer is yes. How much close contact they have, as the overall OCU commander, it wasn't my role to be actually there day and night. We have teams, or had in my day, and they would be close to and available 24/7 should Her Majesty or anyone else in the household require them.
Indeed.
But they're not household members, they are policemen and women.
Yeah, but my point being, and it's the final one, is that in that sense they are part of another group of folk with whom she would be familiar. Because if you're poorly, the last thing you want is strangers coming and going. That wouldn't happen.
No, as far as I'm aware now, no, they are part of the team, but they're only required as and when Her Majesty goes out or there is a particular issue where their knowledge, experience would be called upon. I don't think in this circumstances, clever as undoubtedly most of them are, that they would be able to give much support, and I doubt very much if she's going anywhere until, she is well again.
Indeed so. Wisdom as ever. Di Davis, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this Sunday afternoon. Former head of the Royal Protection Squad there. Di Davis. Now, let's go back to our GB News court reporter, Cameron Walker. Some more politicians and leading lights have taken to social media to express their good wishes. Cameron, take us through it.
Yes, lots of politicians, Alistair. It seems to be the thing to do nowadays, doesn't it? It's going on Twitter to express your view. But the Prime Minister has tweeted in the last hour. He says, "I'm sure I speak for everyone in wishing Her Majesty the Queen a swift recovery from COVID and a rapid return to vibrant good health." Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has tweeted, wishing Her Majesty a swift recovery and a return to full health. The Deputy Common Speaker, Dame Eleanor Lang, tweeted, wishing Her Majesty the Queen well and a speedy recovery from COVID. And the Chancellor as well has retweeted the statement from Buckingham Palace, and he quote tweeted it, and he said, wishing Her Majesty a speedy recovery. And I think it just goes to show, Alistair, that politicians from all over the country are now kind of taking time out of their Sundays to wish Her Majesty the Queen well, because she is, of course, our head of state and our monarch. And the fact that she's got coronavirus and she has got coronavirus for the first time, we're led to believe, bearing in mind the pandemic has been going on for 2 years, I think it just shows what a huge deal this is.
And it's also, it is that tricky time that I said earlier. It by definition, it's coincidental unless there really is Machiavelli is in charge of all our affairs, which I genuinely don't believe. That Boris Johnson, who was the first one you quoted there, is due to make a big statement about lifting these restrictions on Monday when the House of Commons comes back. I mean, putting it bluntly, they've got to be careful what they say so they are not seen as simply being opportunistic and seizing on an issue which is of much graver concern to many folk listening to this conversation. Don't bring politics into it. Talk about the Queen.
I think so, Alistair. And you just see from the tone of those statements there that they are not very political. They are simply words of wishing Her Majesty well. And the fact that the Queen is the most popular member of the royal family with the British public, according to several polls recently, suggests that the public are going to always back Her Majesty the Queen rather than politicians. And Boris Johnson himself has been in hot water recently over various issues. So I think he is aware that whatever he says publicly is going to be picked up and kind of analysed and interpreted, and any kind of hint of politics within that is going to cause a bit of a stir. And like you said, I think he is planning this week to make it well. The fact you don't have to now kind of isolate with COVID. If you have COVID, you don't have to isolate anymore. I myself actually am isolating with COVID at the moment as well, so I can't come into the studio and talk to you directly, Alistair. And I think the Queen, the Palace, has said that she's going to follow all the guidelines, but those guidelines, of course, are going to be changing potentially next week.
Yeah. Fascinating talking to Di Davis from the security point of view and our mutual friend, Dickie Arbiter, who did such sterling service in the press office within the Royal Court for so long. and something emerged which struck me as being genuinely interesting, that when we all started covering, and I'm 5 times as old as you, royal matters, there were protocols, there was a kind of rigidity to it and what have you. What you're now dealing with is a much more open and much more transparent Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle operation. When you've been hitting the phones in the last couple of hours, have you felt that you're dealing with genuinely open, upfront people, or is there still just a degree of cautious that because the subject that we're discussing is delicate, sensitive and important, or is it like dealing with any other form of journalistic inquiry? I'm intrigued by that.
Well, it is interesting, isn't it? I think over the years, like you said, they have become a lot more open, and I'm young myself, so I never had to kind of deal with that kind of things, kind of 20, 30 years ago. But from my experience from the Palace as a young reporter, they are fairly open with certain issues, especially, well, my experience this morning was very good. It was very quick. They gave me the statement pretty much straight away after it broke on the Press Association wires, and they gave me a bit of guidance as well. And I think the fact that they are just so kind of open now does kind of show that they are increasingly modern and are going to come more modern in the future. And I think they're open to adapt to change, both in the way they talk to journalists and communicate with the wider public, and also in their day-to-day work, and in the way the palace is run as well. So I think they are a bit more open, but there's always a degree of caution with the royal family. I think there is always a distinction between their public life and their private life, and everybody has the right to a private life, whether you are the Queen or you are you and I, Alistair. So I think they are always slightly kind of protecting the principals, as we call them. That's those senior members of the royal family, but they all tell us what we need to know when it is appropriate for us to know.
Yes. It's what they call the mystery of the royal family, which I think Badgett was the first one to write so eloquently about. Again, folk listening to us on radio will be hearing what you and I are saying. Folk who are watching us on television will also see a series of pictures that we've been putting up of Her Majesty going about her business, and the one they're looking at the moment has the Princess Royal on the right, and now they're looking at one with the Earl of Wessex, Prince Edward there in the middle, which I think you or somebody else pointed out to me was nothing to do with the Duke of Edinburgh's awards, but about the Commonwealth run. But I tell you what struck me. Edward's played a blinder, Princess Anne's played a blinder. Earlier they saw the Duke of York, who has caused such troubles for her. This last period leading up to her testing positive would have taken a pounding on any person, let alone a person who is in her mid-90s. It's not been an easy period. Are you confident that, in a sense, it'll be a little relief from all of that while she just steps back, focuses on getting herself well? Been a tricky time, is what I'm saying.
Yes, Alistair, I think it's safe to say this week in particular has not been a particularly good one for the royal family. First of all, well, let's break it down into each individual issue. First of all, we had Prince Andrew reported to be settling in an out-of-court settlement for £12 million because a woman called Virginia G. Frey was suing him for allegedly sexually assaulting her when she was a teenager. They have now agreed to settle out of court, but now there is a question of how this reported £12 million is going to be funded. Is this money coming from us, the public, or is it going to be funded privately? And we don't actually know, of course, how much money Prince Andrew has. We know he gets a military pension from his time in the Royal Navy, and we know he gets an allowance from Her Majesty the Queen. But if this £12 million figure, and it is an if that is correct, that's nowhere near enough to cover the costs. So then the question comes, is his mother, the Queen, going to be footing the bills? And that was a big kind of headache for Her Majesty. And the palace are being very tight-lipped on this. Downing Street is also being very tight-lipped on this. We don't know yet how this money is going to be funded, how this payout is going to be funded. But as soon as I know, I will let you know. So that was the first issue. Second issue, Prince Harry is in court. He is suing the Home Office. He is suing the government because he says they are not allowing him to pay for his own police protection. whilst he's in the UK. Since he stepped back as a senior member of the royal family and moved to California with his wife, the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, he therefore kind of forfeited his rights, in a sense, to publicly funded police protection. So from Prince Harry's perspective, he is saying that he wants to pay for the police protection, and the Home Office is saying, well, police protection isn't for sale, it's for the public. You have to find a different way to fund.
Yeah.
Sorry,
no, we're going to have to leave it because we're going to fall off the air in a moment, which I don't want to happen. And I want you to get back to the phones because there are other programmes coming up on GB News, TV and radio that you need to inform. But for the time being, Cameron, thank you very, very much indeed. We have got about 2.5, 3 minutes to go, and I'm delighted to round it up with a really dear friend of mine who I've worked with for many, many years off and on. I'm not sure we actually did a royal report together, but we may well have done, Daisy, at some time. It is Daisy McAndrew. Regular on TV. Absolutely. You've got 2 minutes, in effect. You've been watching it all, thinking about it. Not only a dear friend, but a very experienced journalist. What's your take on the story of Her Majesty having tested positive and how we're all covering it?
Well, Al, there are so many different elements to this, aren't there? I think one of the first things that many of us are going to think about is how on earth did she catch it? We know that this strain is very, very contagious. We know that she did see her son, Prince Charles, about 10 days ago, but that gestation period doesn't really add up. So presumably she got it from somewhere else. Lots of people, of course, wishing her well and, of course, hoping she continues to only show mild symptoms. But there are, as you know, Al, lots of constitutional questions that this raises. If the Queen is incapacitated in her role as head of state, who takes over, hopefully temporarily, not permanently? Well, as you will know, there are these things called councillors of state. There are 4 of them. And what's meant to happen if the Queen can't do things like pass royal assent to new acts of parliament, to new legislation, or can't do other things that she is meant to do, like appointing or rubber stamping new judges, the councillors of state are meant to take over. As I said, there are 4. Now, this is where it gets interesting. They are Charles, Andrew, William and Harry. You're not meant to be able to be a councillor of state if you don't live in the UK. So that pretty much makes Harry redundant. And as we know, he's not a working royal anyway. Prince Andrew, as we all know, is persona non grata at the moment, not a working royal. So he can't really be seen to be doing this role. And not only that, but you're meant to have them in pairs. So they're meant to do the job of the monarch in a pairing. So that only leaves William and Charles. So that is
Daisy,
a headache.
The other thing it only leaves us with is 5 seconds. I have to say thank you and talk to you again soon. Thank you so much. I apologise profusely to Daisy for breaking into her, for you not to hear the full argument, but I think you got pretty well the take on it. Thank you for being with me. I'll be back here 12 o'clock again next Sunday. But until then, stick with GB News, TV and radio for all of your news. From me, a very good afternoon to you. Bye-bye.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking windy with gales for many. Rain, heavy at times, will move southeast with showers following. Let's take a look at the details. Rain, turning heavy for a time, will steadily edge southeastwards. It will be windy with gales or severe gales likely, especially in coastal areas and with heavy rain. It'll become increasingly windy and gusty across the southeast. A band of rain will also encroach from the northwest, feeling mild despite the rain. South Wales will be wet with persistent and heavy rain edging southeast. It will also be windy with gales or severe gales around the coast. The conditions will be very similar across the northwest of England. Rain, which will be heavy for a time, will be accompanied with strong to gale force gusty winds. The heaviest of the rain will be clearing to the south or northeast of England. It will be drier in the north with some brighter spells, but also blustery showers. Windy here too. It'll be a little drier and brighter in Scotland with some sunny spells possible. There will be blustery showers, which will be wintry over higher ground, feeling quite chilly too. There will be a mix of sunny spells and scattered blustery showers for Northern Ireland. The showers will be wintry at times and it'll be windy with coastal gales. OK, so the rain will steadily clear southeast with showers following, wintry in the north and remaining windy for many, and that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So Howie in for Real Britain, Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.